Hello and welcome to Module 2. As you can see, there is a long list of learning targets with the topic being using the pen and entering text in Smart Notebook. We're going to break it into chunks. The first chunk basically deals with what you can do with the pens. So in Smart Notebook, I can use the pen, the calligraphic pen, the crayon, the highlighter, the creative pen, and paintbrush modes of pen input in Smart Notebook. I can change the properties such as color, thickness, style, and transparency of various pen input. I can move, resize, and rotate what I've already written or drawn with the pen. I can set current pen properties as default. If you really like what the pen is doing, you can come back to that. And group and ungroup pen input, and we'll see more about that soon. Before diving into the pens, I want to show off a couple of features of Smart Notebook that you'll be using over and over again. Remember, we are in Smart Notebook here. Let me show you the icon of what it looks like, Smart Notebook 15. That we downloaded and installed in the last module. So right here we have a page, and I've just put the learning targets up, and I can click on this tab here to see a list of my pages. Think about them as slides in PowerPoint. Right now I just have one page, so I'm going to make a new page to add more content. So two ways to do it. I can use this little green plus with the page, or I can use this little green plus with the page. Notice they're the exact same graphic, they do the exact same thing. So if I tap on that, I get a new blank page. Notice just as easily I can get rid of that page by hitting the red X, and we can see the red X with a page there and the red X with a page there. So I can add a page, remove a page, easy as that. Now I've got the auto hide checkbox checked here, which means as soon as I start manipulating content on the page, that page viewer will disappear. I can always get it back by hitting that tab. Again, as soon as I start touching the page or adding input to the page, it auto hides. So it's still there, and if I uncheck auto hide, it won't disappear. But if I've got that auto hide checked and I start to touch the page, it'll disappear. So if you're wondering where did it go, it's because I have auto hide checked there. It's still there, just hiding in that tab. Okay, let's start playing around with the pens. So first thing I'll do is pick up a pen, also realizing if I prefer to use my finger, that'd be fine too. Pretty much you can use any object. The board can't feel the difference between what you press on it. If you start to write and you see this classic mistake, you'll make it in the middle of class over and over again because we're still on selector mode. So this is the arrow button here. I just need to press the black button there to get black ink. I press the red button there to get red, green to green, you get the idea. Here's blue. Realize that there are more options than just those four colors. We see that down here is all my different pens, and then right beside there are some more options. So you see this drop down arrow gets me to all the options. There's the four up top, black, red, green, blue, but then some other options and then some other ways to change those options that we'll get into here soon. But first I wanted to show you all the different pens available. Notice here, I'm in pen mode, and that is as opposed to all these other modes that we'll talk to. But notice within the pens, there are all these different pens. So calligraphic pen, that's going to make my writing look way better than it actually is. See, it just adds a style to it. If I keep going down the line, the crayon, no surprises there, although black might not be the best choice. Oh, now I pressed blue, but it didn't stay on crayon mode. Notice if I wanted a blue crayon, I'd want to stay on crayon and then get into the colors of my crayon. So there's a blue one there, or I could get as specific as I wanted, but we'll stick with that. There's a blue one. Just going on down the line, there's a highlighter, really good for highlighting text, and you can make that thinner or thicker, that we'll talk about. Here is a text pen. Now this will get into entering text, but notice that I can write a word, wait for a second, and magically it turns into what I want. Now if I like it, I can press the check, or I can just leave it, keep working, and it will just stay there. Notice it tried to recognize that. W, that's pretty good. The creative pen gets all kinds of funky stuff. That's like a black spray paint. If I go down here into the options, we can see there's all kinds of fun options here. Things getting a little crazy. And then let's keep going. Paintbrush attempts to do a replica of a paint stroke. And of course, that can be any color I want to by clicking on any of these. Kind of builds as you do more. Let's see, the magic pen. Magic pen, for now, just know it's magic because it disappears. It's disappearing ink. So if we wait long enough, that will disappear. And then shape recognition pen, I think we'll get to that later when we're talking about entering shapes. It's magic. Now, as we can see, we've managed to fill up the screen here pretty quick. Now, if this was useful class information that I didn't want to just erase, I can just add a new page. Remember we talked about this green plus. If I hit that, everything goes blank. Well, it didn't really go away. It's just that I added a new page, and I can always go back to what I created there. So let's go ahead and erase this stuff, though. What I'm going to do is hit the eraser button. And remember, I can still use the pen. I can use my finger. I can use my palm of my hand, whatever you want, feel comfortable with. But it's on eraser, so any pen will just erase as I go over it. Now, of course, this will take a while if I just start plugging away like this. The way to do it, honestly, if you've got a big chunk of pen that you want to erase, is draw an imaginary circle around the whole thing and tap in the middle. Pretty neat. Notice it did not erase text, and we'll talk about that next. The eraser does not erase text. You have to delete it or cut it out of there. So let's talk about how to access the various properties of pen input. And this refers to changing to custom colors, making the line thickness wider or thinner, making the line dotted if you want, making something at the beginning of the line or an end of the line like a bullet point or an arrow. So we're still on eraser mode. I want to go back to my pen. Notice this is black. And actually, well, let me get to a blank page. And remember, we made a new page here. This was the page where we erased all the stuff from. So I can sort this way. Of course, it was on auto hide. So another way to flip through the pages is by using these arrows. So notice I can go to that one and then to the blank one, and I can go back. And that's just flipping through. We can see it highlighted there as it's not hidden. Notice the arrows are down here as well. If you prefer, they're also right there. So let's get to a blank page. Okay, so now instead of using my default 4 buttons here, I'm going to go up to the properties up here. Remember, these are reflected. We can see it changing as I change these buttons. But we can also get into these here. As you can see, purple is assigned here. But if I want to change that, I can make it pink. I can make it yellow. And notice that is reflected by the button up here. This one is currently set to a little thicker purple dotted line. I can mess around with that again, get the color to something different. And I can mess with my line style here. Notice there's the dotted line. I can go back to straight. I can do a tighter dotted line. I can also mess with the thickness. Notice it was set to a little thicker than normal. I can make it a lot thicker than normal and dotted. I can make it basically any of these combinations I want. Notice some of these are nice for direction giving and pointing out various things. Ends up a nice effect. Another property is transparency. If I drop down here, here's my transparency. So if I wanted my pen to show what's underneath it, notice it's a little different. My arrowhead ended up a little wonky, but that's okay. Okay, now let's say one of these properties of a pen I really liked and I could see myself using over and over again for whatever reason. So I would choose what I want in one of these customs. Remember, these are the 4 default colors, but here's where you can get into the custom stuff. So say I wanted that to no longer be a thin purple line. I wanted it to be a huge dotted line with a bit of transparency like this. Okay? So what do? Well, interestingly enough, there are properties of pens here, but there are also properties under this 4th tab down here. Notice a lot of the same stuff carries over. We have color, we have thickness, line style, how it starts and how it ends. All that stuff is there. The only thing we don't have up there that we do have down here on this one is Save Tool Properties. And notice all it did was take a tap And now my button, while it looks a little ugly, is now reflecting that custom pen that we just made. If I want it to be this one, let's see. Make this kind of dark red, regular, maybe very extra thin, with no transparency. And there it is. And say, oh, I want to save that. Let me go to the tab here. All my stuff is reflected, what I changed there, which of course you could change it from here as well. But if I tap Save Tool Properties, now I get this will always be there until I replace it. Let me do another example. Let's see. Well, how about this time I'll do it from over here. Tool Properties, let's see, we'll do a nice teal, maybe really thick. Why not? Okay, and then we get an idea what it looks like. We say, hey, I like that. Back to the Properties tab, Save Tool Properties. Notice we see it up here, all the 3 custom ones that we did. Okay, so let's erase all this stuff. I'm gonna click my eraser button. I am set to auto hide, so as soon as I touch the board, that side tab area will disappear. Big circle, tap in the middle, should make everything disappear. Notice I can make my eraser different widths. Get some quick pen on there. And if I switch to eraser, which I can also switch up here, notice that's another one reflected, what we do there. So maybe I want a small line for some fine detail erasing, or all the way up to a big circle when I know I want to get a lot in one swoop. Keep in mind that all the pens have various properties that you can change. If I go up here to a different pen like a crayon, notice down here I can change the colors and I can change the thickness. Notice not as many options, no transparency there, no dotted line option there. It just kind of depends on the pen you're using. Let's see another example. The creative pen, well, there's not really many properties there except for thickness. So again, let's try this. But we can always find properties as we click down below, or you might see it in that area there, or we can come over to this Properties tab and the same kind of things will be reflected. Also, option to save the tool properties when it's available. Again, the saving the tool properties isn't always available, just for certain pens. Basically just the standard pen, we can save those tool properties, whatever it is. Now, how do I move, resize, and rotate what I've already written or drawn? Well, first thing to do is go back to the selector. So that is the arrow. Instead of being in the pen or the eraser, I've selected my arrow. It's also reflected up here. Notice anything I change there is also reflected there. I'll still set on auto hide, so as soon as I start manipulating this stuff, that menu will disappear. Real simple. I'm just grabbing by touching a piece of what I've written, and I can move it around. So this is very good for if these were words and I was sorting things. Once I do another, imagine maybe 2 headings, or just changing the attention. I could kind of stack stuff up in a corner and change to something else. Now, when I tap on them, I get this dotted box around it, and that means it's selected. Now, once it's selected, I've got a ton more options I can do with it. Notice I can grab this green handle and rotate it. Kind of a sweet party trick, but there might be some use you can think of for that. I can also resize it with this bottom right handle. So we can make that as bigger or as small as you want. Also nice for if we're trying to save space, maybe shrinking up, whoops, no, that got interesting. Shrinking things up there. Notice it will maintain ratio until you break from that ratio. Now, aside from moving, rotating, and changing the size of your pen input, you can also group things together. Imagine that I wanted these 2 things to work as one. I didn't want to have to move them separate. Maybe it was 2 things that I meant to stick together. Notice still in selector mode, I'm going to draw an imaginary box by going across the diagonal from one side to the other. Let me do that again. Notice it doesn't really matter what corner I start in, but just from one corner to the opposite corner to highlight the pen input. Now, anytime you highlight something aside from this blue dotted line, you get an arrow that drops a menu down. Now, there's all kinds of things to talk about here, but for now, I want to show the group function. So under group, I tap that and then tap group. Now notice I just have one box around it. These are essentially the same object. I can resize them together, I can rotate them together, and of course I can move them around together. Okay? And if I now want to ungroup, again still in selector mode, just tap any of that pen input, my drop down box, I go back to group and select ungroup. Now they're back as, notice they're still selected so they're moving together, but if I tap off and back on, they move as separate objects and they can be selected as separate objects and manipulated as such. Okay, and then if I want to erase, of course I could just delete the whole page, imagine that, now it's gone. Just the two left over. Now, oops, maybe I didn't mean to delete that. I can do the undo button. So there it is. Remember, I can erase like that, or I can do the fancy circle and get this stuff cleared out too. Now, let's check back in with our learning targets. We've so far, whoops, you see I was still on eraser, so we go to selector. We checked out all those different kinds of pen input, as well as changing the properties. Remember, the weird part about that is the properties for the pens are located here, as well as this properties tab, and this properties tab gives you a few more options, such as saving the properties in those buttons there. We moved, resized, and rotate what we already written. Earlier on, we set the current properties as default. Again, remember that was in this tab there. And then we grouped and ungrouped the pen input. So, quick reminder of that. In selector mode, and this is getting a little ahead, but notice I can select that, I can select this, I can even group these two things together if I wanted to. Well, let's bring it a little closer. And group, group. Now it's one object. Okay. All right, so let's get into the next bunch of learning targets that mostly focuses on adding text input in different ways. Okay, let's get into the second group of learning targets for this module. It's basically all about entering text in Smart Notebook. So we want to get the software to recognize a word I've written with the pen and convert it to text. We saw a little bit about that. We actually saw it with the text pen. So entering the text with text pen, we'll go over in detail. Entering text with the text tool using various sizes, colors, font styles, alignments, and transparency. That refers to the properties of the text. We can set those current properties as default if you find a font property that you appreciate and like and want to come back to. We want to see how to edit text already entered. Sometimes it's beneficial to enter the text and then change it once it's in there. We can group and ungroup text boxes. We can group and ungroup pen and text together. We saw that for a second. Erase pen input, we'll go back over that. Delete text input. Notice it's not the same. We can't use the eraser function to delete text input. Now, we also want to go over saving a file, a .notebook file, opening a .notebook file to come back to it, and also submitting a .notebook file in Canvas, and that's how you complete this module. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is add a new page. Remember, that's the green plus. I can also access that right here. I can verify that a new page has been added by looking at my page sorter. And the next thing I'm going to do is just hit this A here. The A tells Notebook that the next thing that it expects is text. So if I just tap or click on any place in the page, and then I can just write something. Okay? And now that it's up there, I can use the selector to move it around. I can rotate it just like pen, and do other things like group it if I had something else highlighted. Realize there are tons of different pen fonts and properties. They'll pop up right out beside the pen and then drop down if there's not enough room. So we can get into our bold and our italics and our underlining. And then, of course, if I tap, again, it expects me to write something else there. Now, let's see, some other properties are a little more fancy, but you can explore those. Color is, of course, pretty straightforward. Transparency, similar to the way that our pen input can show something underneath it in varying degrees. And, of course, your font list as well as your font size. So as soon as I tap for a new text box to form, I can go ahead and change these properties to anything that I might want. Okay. Okay, and of course maybe I wanted that bigger. Now I can, just like in Word or anything else, double tap or even triple click to highlight it, or the old dragging the mouse over to highlight it, and then I can go into properties and change it after the fact as well. Now, just like with pen, there are properties over on this properties tab as well, reflected. What I see, we can see we're in the center justified, we're still in just black. Line spacing and adding space after paragraphs is an extra option that you get down here. These are also reflected with this drop down here. So just, again, two places to access those properties. There are two ways to add text without using a keyboard that I wanted to bring up as well. One is just being in pen mode. Let's just select the default black and okay, so of course in my chicken scratch we've got a sentence there. If I select it, realize I had to go back to the selector arrow. If I select that and it shows up all as one box, of course we might need to group it if it ended up showing up as more than one box. I click my down arrow and I want to go to recognize. Let's see if it recognizes. And there we go. And it attempts to match the font that it thinks it was close to your writing. I guess it's underlining. I'm not sure exactly why it underlines. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. The other way to enter text is through a pen as well, but it's called the text recognition pen. I think we saw this, or just the text pen, I'm sorry. So if I just right there, and voila, voila. There we go, okay. It just takes a second to process, and then if I liked it, I could press the check or just wait, or if I didn't like it, I could press that X and try it again. Once the text is there, all the same properties apply. I can select it, I can make it bigger one way or the other. Remember, I can also select it and then mess with the properties here as well, or mess with the properties here, which I can't see because it's behind there. But remember, two ways to do it always. Now these buttons here pop up when I go into text mode. And notice there's more in the drop-down box, but these are kind of my default text properties and text font boxes. So if I select one, well, it will just use whatever properties happens to be. Okay, so, but if I didn't like that, notice it's still selected there. I can go ahead and change the properties to, look for that Joker man again, it's easily recognizable, to that. And notice, until I go over to here and select Save to Tool Properties, now it's changed. Notice, now anytime I want to go back to that text, I just select that first one and go for it. Okay, let's talk about grouping. So notice every one of these, and also notice I'm selector mode to be able to move these around like this. Every one of these is its own separate object. But a lot of times there's reason to group text together. Let me make that one object. So to select individual things, you just tap on them somewhere. But to select more than one thing, that's that diagonal from one corner to the opposite corner box that you draw just by dragging your finger along on the screen over what you're trying to select. Now you can see they're both selected. They both have their individual handles to rotate, and they'll rotate together. And these drop-down boxes will also affect them both. So I'm going to go ahead and go down to Group, and then Group, and we'll see it turns into one text box, and this is now one object. Cool thing about this is you can also group writing as well. Let's see if I wanted to do something like this and have that be one object. Well, I just go back to selector, draw the diagonal, notice it gets both objects, hit one of the drop down box, group, and now it's just one big object. I still have to make sure that when I'm moving it around, I don't want to hit white space, but I've got to at least hit that letter or even the line of pen to get it to start moving. Okay, so remember we mentioned we can't erase text with the eraser. If I go to eraser, we'll see it does erase the pen, but it does not erase the text input. If I want to erase any text, of course there's multiple ways to do it, but easiest way if you're on the board is to select what you want. Let's select this one and do the drop down backs. I can cut it if I think I might want to paste it somewhere else, or I can just hit this delete and it'll disappear. If I'm working on my computer, I can select it and just hit the delete button. Notice it also just disappears. Okay, let's go ahead and save our work so we can use it again and so we can turn in our assignment for Module 2. A couple different ways to do it. I could go to File and select Save or Save As, a pretty typical command. Also, you might recognize the little floppy disk icon there. I can tap on that or click that and it'll go to my typical Save As dialog. Right now it's set to save on the desktop, which is fine. Remember, you can put it anywhere really, into your documents, desktop, wherever you feel comfortable. I tend to go to desktop to start off with if it's something I'm currently working on. So let's name it and then click Save. And now if we check on the desktop, we'll see that I've got a new file here, test file. It's open right now, but now I can close this. Side note, when you go to close it and it's not saved, it will ask you if you want to save, kind of like Word or PowerPoint. But now I can reopen this and it'll be exactly where I left off. Now this is important because your assignment for Module 2 is actually to create a notebook file exemplifying the skills, the learning targets. Here we can see them in two groups. The first group was here, mostly dealing with the pen, and then arrow over. The next group was here, mostly dealing with how to get text entered into Smart Notebook. And then, so we've saved the notebook file, we've opened the notebook file. Let's quick see how to submit that notebook file in Canvas. So I'll go back to my browser. Here's the module, Module 2. We can see that I can hit this link here, submit my file, or I can go back to the modules and then just click on Module 2 Notebook File Submission. And from there are little instructions here. Remember the topic was using pen and entering text. The directions: create a .notebook file that exemplifies the skills presented in Module 2 page. To be reminded, you can click there and it'll get back to Module 2. But I will take us right back to where we were. To submit a file, click Submit Assignment button. So you don't see it here because this is the teacher version of the site, but you will see somewhere around here a Submit File or Submit Assignment button. And then you find that file and wherever you saved it, add it. You'll see it once you find it, and then click Submit Assignment, and you should see some confirmation that it was submitted correctly. Thank you, and remember, always feel free to let me know if I can help with any of these modules, and I'd love to meet you face to face during your planning period or after school. Just let me know, we can set it up. Thanks.